We're here today to talk a little bit about our enrollment trends in the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools, as well as some of our demographic trends. And so that's the basis of our discussion. And just so that you know, this is purely informational. What we're seeking to do with these various events is just level set on information. So tonight, I'm going to throw a lot of slides at you that have, graphs on them, and I want to apologize ahead of time. I know it's the evening time, and sometimes they can be difficult to look at. But what we're seeking to do is really tell our story in an honest and transparent way, and to discuss how enrollment trends, demographic trends kind of impact the school district financially. I always like to just settle in on our starter slide here. I don't want to gloss over it. As you can see, it says, Shaping the Future Together, Reimagining CHCCS in a Time of Change. And I don't want those words to really come across as hyperbolic. We are positioning ourselves to become a smaller district. And it's time that we kind of acknowledge that publicly, because we are experiencing declining enrollment. And as you will see in the coming slides, we've been experiencing the declining enrollment for the better part of a decade, right? And so that's what we'll show you today. When I was appointed superintendent, part of my speech really focused on the future. And as you can see, this is one of the quotes we pulled. And it kind of outlines this idea that our next 25 years will not look like our previous 25 years. And that was not some, dynamic prediction of what our future is. It was basically an acknowledgement that our reality is changing in public education, particularly how public education is funded. Even in North Carolina, how the General Assembly funds schools, the amount of resources that are provided to public schools is shifting. There is some uncertainty even at the federal level in terms of how funding supports public schools. And then you layer on top of that what I just mentioned about declining student enrollment, and that creates another reality for us. And so part of our next 25 years, we're going to have to get used to a different kind of funding model, and partly declining student enrollment and responding to that until we can see that it levels out. I'm going to show you a video. It's a 3-minute video. It moves pretty fast. And it features Dr. Nathan Dollar from Carolina Demography, which is a nonprofit organization housed at UNC, which helps municipalities and other public organizations really understand the demographic trends that impact that institution. Last year at our school board retreat, Dr. Dollar presented to our board some of the demographic shifts happening right here in Orange County. And like I said, it moves pretty fast. But I want you to just take a moment to pull a few nuggets from it, because it does kind of summarize pretty well what's happening in Orange County. But just take a few nuggets from it, and on the back end, we'll begin to talk about it. And I'll show you some slides, some of which Dr. Dollar will also speak to. No audio. We're getting some help back there.
Data detective work, the effect of the pandemic is clear. Between 2019 and 2021 school year, net annual change in ADM in Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools, you lost 540 kids in just that 1 year. The following year, you lost 353 kids between school years 2021 and 21-22. The loss started to abate in 23, but you still lost 21 kids and then picked back up last year. Kindergarten saw 28% decline in ADM, which is by far the biggest out of all the grades. So what's happening? This is the question at hand. you see, starting in 2014, or 2015 rather, you start to see a steady decline. This is what we would largely expect in Chapel Hill. First of all, fertility is on the decline everywhere. This is not unique to here. It's not unique to North Carolina, United States. It's a global phenomenon. Fertility is on the decline. So what that suggests is that not only do you have declining births, but you also have fewer families moving in with preschool-age children who are going to enroll in kindergarten. The number of school-age children, 5 to 17, has been decreasing in Chapel Hill and Carrboro during our same time period. So in 2020, we were at 13,120, but during this time period, it dropped about 700 kids to 12,421 school-age children. There's a big part of your answer right there. That's a huge part of your answer of where your 1,000 kids went. That's not all of it, but that's some of it.
Your previous slide was the most unmasking for me. It isn't this question of they're here, but they're choosing something else. There's some of it was that they're actually not here anymore, irrespective of what they're choosing.
And to be clear, it's a yes and, right? So it's an out migration and it's a diversification of market shares. You saw a 61% increase in homeschool enrollment in Orange County between 18 and 21. It's reasonable to assume that some of the 1,000 students that you lost between 2019 and 2020 went to homeschools, right? And we know that some went to charters as well. So yes, so this is private school enrollment, 24% increase between 21 and 24. But again, it's likely the number of students that you're losing to private schools over this period is likely much higher, right? And so that's basically your story. If I had to put this in very broad strokes, I would say is probably about half of those 1,000 students moved out of the district and they weren't replaced. And then piecing together the number of students that you lost to homeschools, the number of students that you lost to charter schools, and the number of students that you lost to private schools. Those are your stories right there. Out migration, not enough in migration, and increasing diversification. We did a little, data detective work.
So, like I said, a 3-minute video that moves pretty fast, but there's a lot of data, a lot of nuggets you can pull from that video. One that resonates with me is the idea that there's just not as many 5 to 17-year-olds living in our community anymore, and that's a reality that we're going to have to deal with. So I want to take the rest of our time to really run through a number of charts that tell our story. And afterward, we can get into some Q&A, that I think will kind of enhance the conversation. But for the next 20 minutes or so, I just want to take some time to go through a few slides. And I know this projector is a little dim and things might be hard to see, but I'll try to do my best to kind of point out what the data points are. This first slide is looking at our average daily membership for the last 10 years. And you can see on this chart in about 2020, we had about 12,300 students, 12,300 students. But since that time, there's been a steady decline in our enrollment, our average daily membership. I know it's difficult to see, but this year, this academic year, 25-26, we're sitting at about 10,800 students. And that number is not a verified number, and what I mean by that, I'll talk about in a bit. But the way schools are funded is based on enrollment on a particular day, or the best of 2 particular days, and this number does not reflect that, but we're working on that as a district. But we know right now that last year we had about 11,100 students, so that's about a 300 student decline in enrollment. And so why is this important? It's important because the way public schools are funded in North Carolina goes like this. So current year's enrollment is based on, current year's funding is based on the previous year's enrollment. So this academic year, the one we're in right now, was based on the enrollment of 11,100 students. So if we know today that we have about 10,800 students, and that represents a decline, that gives us a pretty good sense of what next year will look like. And any school district who's experiencing this has to act now. They can't wait until next year to begin to address declining student enrollment. And there are some districts that you can read about on any given day that don't address these types of challenges, and you kind of see what happens when you don't. And so that's what we're here to really talk about. So let's look at the math. So as I mentioned, last year we had about 11,100 students. That dictates this current year's funding. Next year we're looking at about 10,800. That gives us a pretty good sense of what next year looks like. We get about $7,500 in state funding per student to help fund our schools, and that represents $2.1 million less in state funding than we received this current year. This does not represent a crisis for our district, kind of given our overall budget, but it is our responsibility as an administration to address and have balanced budgets. And because we're in this climate of declining student enrollment, we don't see this trend just kind of alleviating all of a sudden, and that's why I'm here today, is to appeal to our community that we can't continue to kind of fund ourselves like we're a 12,000 student district. We have to pivot to the district we are becoming, and part of this enrollment information that I'm sharing today will tell the story about what we are becoming. So it was a fair question Dr. Dollar asked, so where did the students go? Some of the slides that you'll see were presented by Dr. Dollar, but this schematic really looks at student or school enrollment between the years of 2019 and 2024. You can see Orange County here. Private school enrollment increased 15% during that window, 162 students, and you can kind of compare us to our neighboring communities as well. Not a major increase, but it is something. This is looking at homeschool enrollment between those same windows, 2019 to 2024. Again, looking at Orange County, we had a 2% increase, or that represents 20 students. As Dr. Dollar mentioned, it's not the whole story with respect to declining enrollment, but it certainly is part of the story. And I know we have some folks here who are new to our district, new to Chapel Hill. And so I should tell you, so this Orange County number represents two school districts, the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools as well as the Orange County Schools. We have two public school districts within our county. So that number is shared between both districts.
Can I ask why you're combining the two, since they're two districts, to look at?
Well, this information we did not generate this information. It came from the state, I believe.
But the chart before was just about the Chapel Hill. The conversation from the demography is just about the Chapel Hill.
In some cases, yes. And I'll point out where that is true. So this chart is a bit difficult to look at in terms of how busy it is, but I would turn your attention to the far right side of the chart. You will see this looks at the students who are exiting the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools. If you look at this yellow portion here, both of them kind of look yellow from here, but you'll see that 71% of the students who exit our district either go to another public school in North Carolina or they move out of the state or the country. So, they might go from here to Wake County or here to Durham or from here to another country. And so that represents about 71% of our students that leave the district. There are three data points below that. You can see there that represents about 26%. And those are the students and families that are choosing a private school, charter school, or a homeschool. And at the bottom of this chart, you can also see the private schools that our students typically go to in any given year. But again, as you can see, this really represents where our students are going. So about 71% of our students move out of the district, they go to another public school in North Carolina, or they move out of the state or the country. So the question also was raised, are they even here anymore? And this is more about birth rates. And so there are some very interesting data concerning our community as well. And so this chart is looking at kindergarten enrollment for the last 10 years or so. There was a high of, 850 students in 2016, and I think this one ends at 2026, about 600 and something students. I know it's difficult to see. I believe that's what the number is. But you can see the general trend is that our kindergarten enrollment over the past 10 years is really decreasing. Some of you who have children in our elementary schools, or you may be educators in our elementary schools, you're seeing this in real time on the ground. When I walk into our schools, the kindergarten hallway, there are just fewer kindergarten classes than there has been, from when I started here almost 20 years ago. I mean, that's a drastic change for us. This chart is very interesting as well, really tough to see, but we're looking at cohort enrollment over the past 10 years. And this chart really tells us two stories. And I'm going to try to really point out what the stories are, given that it's difficult to kind of see. So if we look at the 2015-16 kindergarten class, and we follow their cohort across the decades, what you tend to see is that the cohort survival rate is pretty intact. We're not losing hundreds of students, or in fact, in some instances, we're gaining in the cohort. And that's true pretty much for any year that you give, and if you follow the cohort, it really remains intact. So that's one story, that if students, or when students come to us, they typically stay. We don't typically have a lot of students that leave. The second story, which is the story that we'll hear about, is the declining enrollment. So instead of following the cohort, if we just follow the class across years, you see that there is significant drop-off in our numbers. And you will see that's true pretty much for grades K through 8. Not always, but that's the general trend. If you compare that to our high schools, though, the cohorts pretty much stay intact. And if you go across the class years, it's pretty stable. And in fact, it grows a little bit. But what do we know? We know that these K through 8s will soon be what? High school students. And so that trend we anticipate will move from our elementary and middle schools to our high schools. And we have to begin to plan for that. So that's part of our story. This graph, I told you I'm going to show you a lot of graphs. But this looks at, it's a comparison between our graduation numbers and our kindergarten enrollment. This blue line represents our graduation numbers, the number of students we graduate. The pink line represents the number of kindergartners that we're bringing in. And what this story tells us is that we're graduating more students than what we're bringing in. And this is similar to, studies we might do in our population where we're looking at deaths versus births to kind of get a sense of what our growth rates are. The same is similar. You can see where early on, about 10 years ago, it was pretty even, but there is a growing divide. Again, part of our story in terms of what we're becoming as a district. Dr. Dollar showed this in his 3-minute clip and to our board last year at their retreat. Looks at live births in Chapel Hill-Carrboro. And these live births are from residents who live in Chapel Hill and Carrboro. And so the idea is that if you're born here and you're a resident here, we anticipate in 5 years you'll be entering our kindergarten. I mean, that's the hope. And so you see, and this is not the most up-to-date numbers, but you see in 2010, there were 721 live births. residents in Chapel Hill and Carrboro. In 2021, that number, I think that's, 572. So again, a general decline in births here in Chapel Hill-Carrboro, and we don't necessarily anticipate as many kindergartners coming into our district. And this is another piece of evidence that really kind of points toward that. Again, looking at enrollment, I've told this story just a moment ago, but this is just a different way to look at it. We're looking at enrollment between the years of 2020 and 2025. Again, K through 8, you can look at the graph here. What do you see? Declining enrollment. Look at our high schools. They're pretty stable. At least they are right now. Pretty stable. And you know, for those of you who may have high school age students, children, it may be pretty tight in there, or pretty robust. Maybe not so much at the elementary and middle school level. So all of this is really within the context of our demographics in Orange County. I mean, the numbers, the declining enrollment, they don't really exist in a vacuum, but it's informed by our local demographics. And so we want to share just some data about that as well. So here we're looking at population growth from the U.S. Census 2010 and 2020 in Orange County, all of Orange County. And so you see here in 2010, just 130,000, just above that. In 2020, 148,000. But we're growing. Maybe to not the degree of our neighbors, Chatham, Durham and Wake. I mean, they're growing at about twice the rate, but we're growing. And sometimes when you look around in Chapel Hill and Carrboro, you see buildings going up everywhere. I mean, you can kind of get the sense that, yeah, we're growing. But there's a challenge. So, and that challenge is that in Orange County, 73% of that growth is among the population 65 years and older. And that's not the population that tends to generate school-age children. I mean, not that I'm aware of, growth is good. Growth certainly helps schools. I mean, that's not a bad thing. But in terms of how we are funded as a public school, we are funded based on children. And this is the picture of our community. This is really difficult to see, but it just tells the same story, and I'll explain it. So this first yellow line, again, we're looking at our community. This first yellow line represents the population in our district 5 years old and younger. And it was a decline in between the census years of 2000, 2010, and 2020. So there was a decline in the population 5 and below of 11%. The second yellow line is the population 65 years and older between these census dates. You probably can't see it, but it says 68.8% increase in that population. So we're becoming an older community, and our data is suggesting that that is the case. So I want to return to this idea around how schools are funded. As I said, the current year's funding is based on previous year's enrollment. I'm not going to read through this, but the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction funds schools based on what's called a PMR, or Principal Monthly Report. And it's the best of two different PMRs. So they take the PMR on, day 30, and then 30 days later they might, take another PMR. And so whichever the best or the highest number is kind of what schools are funded on. And so that's the number that we're waiting on for our district. And our administration is working on that. So there's no trick or anything like that with respect to school funding. The numbers are the numbers. And, what we're seeing just because we're tracking attendance is that we have a decline. And as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, that decline we've been experiencing for the better part of a decade. And it's time that we pivot our district to become what our data is suggesting. I know I showed this before, but we're looking at about $2.1 million. It could be more if we find that our enrollment has decreased more than what we had suggested. And so this is one reason that we're wanting to really interface with our community, because this is not doom and gloom. This is not a crisis. It's not a crisis if we work together to pivot to become a smaller district, perhaps a 9,000 student district. And there's nothing inherently wrong with being a 9,000 student district unless you're funding yourself as a, 12,000 student district. And as superintendent, I have to align our district, our resources with the students, the funding we generate. It doesn't necessarily mean that the services and programs that we've all come to know and love, are going away. But we do have to make some hard decisions about, what we're funding. So this represents an opportunity as well. Like, while we're kind of reimagining CHCCS with respect to, the dollars and cents that we get, this is also an opportunity to ask the question, what do we want to become? What services, or opportunities do we want to provide our students that we're not currently providing? And which means that we might have to make a harder pivot if there's some things we want to do that we're currently not doing that represent opportunities for our children. And so that's kind of what we're here to kind of talk about today. This is the end of my presentation. I don't have any more charts to show you. But again, it really tells our story. And we felt it was important to kind of share this personally with our community and be in a place where we can answer questions as well.
I'll give you a chance to get a drink of water, Dr. Trice. I'll introduce myself. I'm Andy Jenks. I'm the Chief Communications Officer here at Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools. That QR code is the same QR code as the one on the handout that was in the in the hallway. And an adjustment we made while he was speaking is we put a link to the slide deck, because admittedly that was kind of hard to see on this screen. So you can use the QR code on your handout or the one you see on the screen now. It'll pull up not just a feedback form with some question prompts, but also a link to the slides that you just saw this evening. As for the next half hour of our time together, the way it's worked at our previous session is I'm going to go around with this microphone so folks in the room can hear us, as well as folks watching on the live stream or the recording. I will generally start on this side of the room, and then I'll move to this side of the room if anyone raises their hand. But it doesn't have to be a question. It can be a thought, an idea, or just anything on your mind that you feel like sharing in front of a crowd. So with that, I will turn it over to anyone who's interested in sharing something with Dr. Trice and all of us here together. I will go right here. Thanks for getting us started.
Given declining enrollment, land has been set aside in the Green Tract for a new elementary school potentially. Are we still planning on that, or are we rethinking that decision? And then also on the bond issue, that was $300 million. We issued $300 million in debt at the peak of an interest rate cycle, knowing one of the elementary schools would have to close. Did we borrow too much and unintentionally saddle us with extra debt that we might not have needed?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Two very different questions, I know.
I'm sorry, no, great question. And so, the reality is that the reality is that we need new schools. And when you look at our oldest buildings, the amount of money that it is pulling out of our budget to do break-fix repairs is unsustainable. And so we have to build new elementary schools. So I don't think any of this is going to change our bond referendum or the way we approach our bond in any significant ways, because we will likely need to shift to newer schools. With respect to closing elementary schools, we haven't been directed by our board to pursue that. You should know that December 11th, our board has a retreat. At that retreat, Dr. Dollar, who was on the video, will be presenting new and updated information around, our enrollment and demographics in our community. And I fully expect, those types of conversations to come up in December. But as of today, we have not been directed as an administration to bring any recommendations on school closures. But as you can see, we have declining student enrollment. When there is declining student enrollment, it has an impact on our facilities, not operating at full capacity. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I fully understand.
I'm going to come right here with the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it's a follow-up. I think just thinking strategically, because I'm guessing many of us in this room also weren't many of those meetings last year, and so I appreciate the need to build or replace new elementary schools such as Carrboro or whatnot, but hopefully there will be some forward-looking strategic thinking in terms of consolidating. I think we all appreciate looking at these numbers. There very likely will need to be some consolidating of elementary schools, and I guess as a follow-on, I know the bond is limited in what that money can be spent on, right? Infrastructure, facility, but I also know that there's a lot of land that is owned, and so it seems like that's another opportunity if you consolidate that potentially some of the land owned. I don't know if it's owned by the city or the school district, I'm not exactly sure, but again, just thinking ahead of how are we going to make that up so that our kids who are in the district now and kids in the future who are going to be entering the district are still going to have the benefit of a solid public education, right? Like somehow we've got to, I don't know, we've got to find a way. And so I hope you all will be looking way strategic, like leverage that bond how you all need to, and then we got to find money somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I saw another hand up in this general direction. Yep, be right there. Just for the recording and the live stream viewers, the millions of folks watching at home.
So if an elementary school did close, would it happen as soon as next year?
Yeah, we don't. No, I don't think we could close an elementary school in such a short window. If that's something that the board wants the administration to explore, I would want to know as superintendent as soon as possible, and I'm sure our community would want to know as well. But let's, if we were told in December or January, I think we're looking at the fall of 27 as soon as that it could happen. I don't think we could do it in, next fall.
Thank you.
Maybe a raised hand in this direction. Yep, I'll be right there.
So I know other school districts around the country, one strategy that they've used to encourage people to enroll at the lower levels is to have free or subsidized preschool. If you give any thought to expanding that 4-year-old preschool, it's a way to get people into the system, and preschool's a lot of money. So I would think that savings would really help a lot of parents and might kind of tip the scale in terms of moving to Chapel Hill versus elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't know that we've explored, free pre-K because it is pretty expensive in terms of how you have to outfit facilities and such. I know that at one point our board did explore converting, Lincoln Center, for instance, into a pre-K center, which would consolidate our pre-Ks. So right now they're kind of spread out over our elementary schools. Perhaps there would be some savings there, but we haven't really explored that. But I know that might be something that the board directs us to do.
Wanted to make sure I was acknowledging this side of the room too, but I see a hand waving in my direction.
And I just want to add, I'm sorry, to the pre-K issue. I think one bit of information that is also important. And so we typically have around 100 students on our waiting list for pre-K, and those students tend to be tuition-paying students. The majority of our students in our pre-K programs are funded based on some type of subsidy, depending on their status. So there is a good number of students or families that are looking for pre-K placement that are willing to pay. So that's a tidbit that I think is important to know with respect to your question as well. Yeah.
My turn, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So as a new family here, I would like to share a little bit about what I observed since I moved here to North Carolina. So my family moved from Massachusetts. So after I moved here, I observed there's so many people starting moving to North Carolina. North Carolina is ranking number 3 moving destination in the U.S. after Florida and Texas. Actually, a lot of people started moving here. But when I asked those people, we have the options. Where do we want to stay? Which town? Most people would say Cary. They think Cary have newer houses, right? There are a lot of resources there, and then like affordable living cost, the restaurant, everything, right? And then they think, Chapel Hill is nice, good education too. Cary also have good education too there, but the houses probably, they think Chapel Hill is older, like here. So that's when most of people shared with me, new families who shared with me.
And that's pretty accurate.
Right, you have the data about Cary.
Yeah, I mean, Cary, Wake County in general, I think we're experiencing, Chatham County, which is right next to us, housing increases. We just don't have the same level of, housing availability or affordability in the Chapel Hill-Carrboro community as our surrounding communities. So that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, when I toured the school, I met another new family, and then something, why not many new families here in Chapel Hill? They said, it's so expensive. Who would like to move here?
And I know our elected officials in both towns, I mean, they're hard, they're focused on affordable housing. They have been for some time. But as our data suggests, we just don't have time to wait for that to materialize. We have to act on kind of the demographics that are presented to us and what we intend to experience, I would think, for at least the next decade or so.
I'm going to pass it over here, and then I'll come back.
And then we have one up here as well.
I guess my question becomes less of a question because it partly got touched on and partly in your answer, but I guess, looking at the data, it's clear, but what struck me was the other surrounding county, and like you said, that people moving here, but we're not growing, equivalently. So what's being done in terms of, from the school district with the county and the town council and sort of a broader long-term vision? Because I guess, most of us move here and we work at the university, and the university is it's a fixed entity, and that's not going to be growing, just as we've seen lately in the last 10 months necessarily. So it just doesn't strike me that we have the same as a county, the same developmental and opportunities and jobs that we've seen in these surrounding counties. And what's being done just in interaction between the school council and the county and sort of what the broader vision is.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think there are great relationships with both towns. Our county commissioners certainly have been great thought partners. But the reality is, with respect to housing, much of what we are experiencing now, those decisions were made decades ago. And so when I talk about what we're doing now, I mean, there are robust discussions in our town, among our town elected officials about affordable housing. But I don't know that would generate 2,000 students in our community. But as I mentioned, there's not anything inherently wrong with becoming a 9,000 student district. I don't anticipate that we would lose many of the benefits that I know I've come to enjoy for my children here. I don't think we would lose those. We just can't continue to operate inefficient buildings because that sucks millions out of our budget. We can't continue to pour millions into, schools that are 60, 70 years old because we could be using those funds to enhance our instructional program. So I fully imagine that we'll continue our conversations with the leaders of our towns, I think there is perhaps a closer relationship kind of looking toward the future than there was in the past. Because as I mentioned, the things that we see going up now, those decisions were made decades ago.
I'm going to go here, and then I'm going up front.
So my question really is, yes, on one side we have this falling, admissions or the falling numbers, and that results in some, per student, the district gets $7,500, and we lose money if the numbers go down. But on the other hand, as you also pointed out, there is a lot of building happening in Chapel Hill-Carrboro, and as the prices are high, the taxes are high, right? And a lot of that taxes goes towards funding the school. So we have to really kind of manage, like, yes, operate as a smaller district, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have funds to provide the services, or, we are not only dependent on the state funds, right? So there lies the opportunity. We might have 65 plus years residents, but they are also paying taxes, which are funding our schools.
Yeah, growth is a positive. Like, even if it was 11%, and that is a positive for our school district. I know that, our county commissioners think very hard about increasing taxes and the burden that presents to families, and so it really is a balance. What I would suggest is that there's a way to do this that is smart, and it involves addressing our inefficiencies. If half of our elementary schools are operating at around 50 to 60% capacity, that's a lot of dollars that we're not using appropriately. There's a lot being poured into maintaining buildings that are just old and probably do need to come offline. And so, like I said, I fully expect that will be a part of our conversation. I know maybe 2 months ago, our board did ask for a bit of a study in terms of what it would look like to pull an elementary school offline. We know right now, in terms of fixed costs, that would save us about $1.7 million if we were to pull one elementary school offline. And so I think these are all levers that our board is willing to look at. But as I stand here today, we just haven't been told that this is something we're going to do. I believe, and I don't want to get in front of our board, but I believe what they're waiting on is more information from Dr. Dollar and Carolina Demography. I should let you all know that the county is also contracting with Carolina Demography to analyze student enrollment in both districts and more generally the demographics in our community. The county commissioners expect to get a report from Carolina Demography sometime in late January or February, I believe. And so the information that our board gets in December will be like a preview of what will be shared with our county commissioners later in the new year.
I'm going up here, and then I'm going over to the other side of the room.
So I don't have children in the schools anymore, but I moved here over 30 years ago.
Yes.
And specifically moved to Chapel Hill-Carrboro because I was told these were the best schools in the state. And it was, at a very robust time, in fact, a very robust time for the district. So the school district was the driver for growth in the area at that time. The other factor was where could you afford to live, and we could afford to live in Carrboro then, which was the affordable area, which is no longer the case. So there's this twin-headed issue of affordability, housing stock, and scale. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing today, which I think has a lot of, as you said, opportunity, is to reimagine the schools at the scale that it can survive and be a driver for change and innovation. But that has to be presented. I don't think that we can continue to have conversations around it. I think there has to be a model presented that says this is where we have to go, and then the pieces will fall into place. Because I can tell you the conversations around affordability have been happening so long that there's nothing affordable anymore.
Sure.
And I think that the school district might have to be the innovator in saying, this is the kind of school we can sustain and support, and see, if they build it, if you build it, who will come?
Yeah.
And what will that look like? So I'm encouraged by the conversation, but I also, from my history here, suggest that somebody has to take the lead in creating that, and I'm not sure it's the elected bodies that you just mentioned. It may be the school district that has to do that.
Thank you for that. I would agree, and we're not a Chatham County where we have large tracts of land that can, attract the auto industry, which would help, the tax base and that type of thing. I mean, we really do rely heavily on, residential property.
And the elephant in the room is the biggest real estate owner doesn't pay any taxes.
Right.
And that's not changing.
Yeah. No.
I've got one over here, and then I'm going to go to the back of the room after this.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to stay over here.
First, thank you very much for coming out, making this opportunity for us to hear from you, for you to hear from us. So really appreciate that, that opportunity. Just a couple different comments. First, I've heard a couple different folks talk about the bonds. I don't want to get into details, but it might be worthwhile refreshing the community on what the bond issue was and when those dollars have actually been taken out, because I don't think we actually borrowed $1 yet. So just to think about reminding the community on what the actual details are there when we start paying, right? So just take away, you think about it. The person who was just speaking, I think her comments were very well made, so I'm going to echo kind of what I just heard because I was taking some notes, so thank you for already prompting this. As you think about, and I'm sure you have, I understand you have not formally presented to the board because they've not asked you to, but many of us work in technical fields where it's a sensitivity analysis. As you look at what the population could do, how does that mark against the number of schools that would make sense, and what would those dollar figures, where would those line out? So if it continues dropping at $250 a year, right, what would that look like in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, right? If it drops faster, what might that look like? If it drops slower, what might that look like? My understanding, again, you guys can help me, you're communication experts. I understand we've been running at a deficit for the last several years as the county has wanted us to run down our rainy day fund. So it's not like we've been balanced the last 3 or 4 years. We've been deficit spending. We've been spending more than we've been taking in. And I understand that rainy day fund is largely gone now from previous communications that have been shared. Again, I could be wrong, perfectly willing to accept that. But if we're already running a deficit and the future revenues are going to be lower than they have been, that just makes that sensitivity analysis even more important because we've got to drop potentially further than we would think to catch back up on the revenue side so that our spending revenues come into balance. Again, so I'm sure it's stuff you've been thinking about to be able to have the slides you had here tonight. The board has not officially asked you to do it, but I'm confident that's what the community is going to want to see are what some of those forecasts could look like. If we're already behind, right, how do we at minimum catch up so we're neutral, but ideally, as you commented earlier, get ahead of it.
Sure.
And then finally, and this is going to get very squishy, but where's the value to the students per spending opportunity? So if you say, well, the value is in the teachers. Okay, well, how do we maximize the number of teachers we keep by reducing the facility infrastructure? If the value is in foreign language, right, but all these various programs that we have and people love, right, and I'm not about to tell you to get rid of performing arts, right, my daughter does these things, foreign language, she does these things, but they all cost more. So what are those delighters? What are those must-haves? What's the cost for each one of them? And if we're thinking differently, what are things we want to change to try and make those dollars make sense again? Because at the end of the day, if we can't pay for it, it's not going to work. So I don't need a response to any of those, but those are all the thoughts those are the questions that are already coming up. I think you're just going to be more and more and more. So how do we prioritize against those various options of cost reductions against the value each of those things would keep or retain for the students in the district?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I would say, I agree with everything that you said. I mean, and those are the types of things that we are thinking about as an administration. With respect to deficit spending over time, tomorrow is Thursday. Our auditors will be presenting our financial audit for the end of year last year. And we have begun to turn the tide on that. And so we've addressed the structural deficit issue that we've been experiencing the past couple of years. And because of many of the difficult decisions we've had to make in terms of the reduction in force in the last couple of years, we anticipate beginning to rebuild back the fund balance this fiscal year. So absolutely.
Let me go right over here.
All right, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry.
Also, I was looking at the statistics a lot. Well, thank you for that. You mentioned that there are opportunities in becoming a smaller school district. We've heard about optimizing building infrastructure and not wanting to compromise on academic quality. But now, what are these opportunities? I may not have got my head around that part. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, and I don't want to define what I think, our community believes the opportunities are, from my office. I think that's the conversation we're looking to have. But we know, for instance, that our teachers haven't had a real raise in some time. And in fact, if you look over the course of years, they're probably making less money than they were, 10 years ago because of inflation and other things, the cost of health care. I can sit here and tell you as superintendent, it is incredibly difficult to attract teachers to our district, where 15 years ago when I was here, we would have 20 applicants for, a calculus teaching position in one of our high schools. We'll be lucky to get 3 right now, and lucky if 2 of those are qualified. And so I think pay and benefits are certainly something that we could address if we address the inefficiencies. That's something that, is important to me because I want to have the most highly trained, knowledgeable staff possible. The issue of pre-K came up. The expansion of pre-K is something that our community has been interested in. It's very expensive. But if that's, one of the things that we want to do as a community, much to a gentleman here, I'm sorry I don't know your name, but you have to put a cost to that. And if that cost is known, it'll give us information about how deep our pivot needs to be to do, a 5% raise for teachers or benefits and during pre-K. We know about 1/3 of our students who graduate every year don't choose a 4-year university, right? And how do we expand pathways for 1/3 of our students who don't choose a 4-year university to begin obtaining credentials before they graduate high school, which might mean expanding CTE programs in our schools, or maybe the use, if we have to close a school, can we add more CTE programs in a school that's been closed down, that it will expand opportunity for students to earn degrees and credentials before they leave high. So those are just examples of what could be. But again, we can't even begin to think about that until we pivot toward the reality of our enrollment numbers. So those are just some examples. No, it's not spending more money in my eyes. It's not wasting money on upfitting schools that are old. It's addressing the inefficiencies that we have today in our schools and using the money that's already spent to do some of these innovative things. That's kind of the way I'm thinking about it.
Dr. Trice, I'll come all the way over here.
My question sort of ties into that question also, because I'm looking at all of these beautiful images and words about thinking and acting differently and wellness and joy. And I also just did the digital learning survey, and I'm just thinking there is an opportunity to use technology differently. I do not see Chromebooks, I don't think. These are small pictures in any of these pictures, and I feel like there's so much time on Chromebooks in our schools, but it's not the exciting part that we're focused on here, and I just wonder, is there space to think in radically exciting different ways about reducing technology and finding much more moderation with technology use in a smaller district? Is that something that people are thinking about?
Well, I mean, as you just mentioned, I think, we're developing a new digital technology plan. I know for a fact that those types of conversations are happening. I can't sit here and say that, you know, removing Chromebooks would, you know, fill that deficit. And I don't, you know, I think whatever we do around technology should enhance teaching and learning irrespective of the costs. But that might be a possibility. You know, the funding source for technology we can't use to do some of the more innovative things that I just mentioned because there's a specific use for that funding source. But again, when you talk about thinking radically different around teaching and learning, certainly technology has to be a part of that conversation. And whether that's walking back a bit, I mean, that's certainly on the table. You may know that we adopted a new K-12 science curriculum last year. We looked at about 7 different vendors, most of which were technology focused. We made an intentional decision not to go with a technology-focused vendor for our K-12 science curriculum and went with a vendor that was more hands-on, experiential. And so those are the types of decisions that moving forward, our chief academic officer over here, will kind of continue to carry, and you know, he's also very much involved with our technology group as well. So, you know, very good question, though.
I'll go right here.
Thank you. Are we becoming just a miniaturized version of what we already are? Like, so you're saying 9,000, we can imagine a 9,000 student school district. Does that look the same demographically as the 12,000 school district we had a couple years ago? Or are we not just becoming smaller, but we're also demographically somewhat becoming different? I didn't see anything in the presentation about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So certainly we're becoming smaller, but over the course of that time, demographics have also shifted a bit. I'll give you an example. So our multi-language learner student population has certainly increased when you look across those 10 years. That were generally on the screen. What that means for us as an administration, you know, programming and support, you know, increases when you have increases in student populations. The same for our special education population has been increasing. And with those two examples, not only is the population increasing, but the level of need is also increasing for both of those populations. So a very smart question. That also kind of gets at dollars and cents. And so you can kind of see how the inequity creeps in. If your demographics are changing, you perhaps have a more needy population, but we're spending so much money on inefficiencies, it doesn't allow you to address your changing demographics. And so we know we're not going to be able to go to the General Assembly and ask for more money. We don't expect that the federal government is going to give us any money. I think we're blessed to live in a community where our county commissioners already fund us at a very high level, the top in the state, and I don't anticipate that we would get much more there. What I see as a promise in our district and how we're different than, you know, I won't call out any districts, but districts that you read about in the news, is that we have been living with so much inefficiency in our systems. And if we really just address those things, it will generate money that is already flowing through our community that we can use differently to do some of the things that we're talking about.
I'm going to go right here, but also let folks know we're coming up near the end of our advertised time, so if anyone needs to slip out at 7:30, that's cool, no hard feelings, but we also are going to keep passing the mic around so folks can share what's on their mind.
Hi, so I don't have a current student in the school district. I'll have my son coming up in the fall, so he's a rising kindergartner. Yay. Yeah. But I appreciate the opportunity to join and learn about what's happening within the school district and how well the news got spread. Also shared it within my daycare. But I have been through 2 different daycares within the area, and I know the wait list is long, right? Once you find out you're pregnant, right, you are supposed to apply to daycare in hopes that you get a spot. Yeah. Have we looked at, I guess, the quantity of daycares in the area? And is there enough to support those children? because I would assume people that go to daycare here will eventually then transfer into the school district. I know moving to the area in 2020, it was big in my criteria, right? Okay, house, are we close to the supermarket, right? What daycare is available? Is it nearby? Is it a quality daycare? That's another key too, not just a daycare. And I guess, are those kids, is there enough? And then are those children landing in the school district, or are they leaving for different reasons? And somewhat piggybacking off the, hey, is there opportunity in that area? But it seems like there's people banging in the doors to get their kids in the area. And is it just a function of not enough resources available for them to support it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And to answer the first part, yes, certainly. And I know a little bit about trying to get your kids in a quality daycare, having been here a while. And but the reality is, you know, we do have a lot of students in pre-K who may not be residents in Chapel Hill-Carrboro. Like the university draws a lot of personnel. You know, they're dropping their kids off at Spanish for Fun, but they might live in Durham or something like that. And so we do have our eye toward what the actual birth rate is in our community, as was shown on the screen. But it does represent an opportunity to also recruit. We do run into, you know, housing a bit, you know, sometimes, you know, at our county commissioner meeting a couple of months ago, there was an example used, a condo that was built in Carrboro, you know, 2-bedroom, $650,000. And those aren't the type of housing, you know, dynamics that really draw families in. And so we do run into that a bit. But yes, through our pre-K program, we do the best we can in terms of targeting you know, families who live in Chapel Hill and Carrboro, and making sure that they know about our schools. There's a waiting list for our own pre-K program. So we have 5-star pre-K programs in our district, but we have over 100, you know, pre-K students who don't have a slot, and we don't have space or facilities to place them. And we don't necessarily charge a competitive rate for our pre-K slots. We've increased our rate over the past year, but we're very competitive in terms of the surrounding 5-star pre-K opportunities. So.
I see a follow-up question here, but first may I offer the mic to anyone who hasn't yet had an opportunity to share? The mic is yours.
So Dr. Trice, I'm going to put you on the spot here because you keep talking about the sucking of resources and inefficiencies, but if they put a shovel in the ground tomorrow, we wouldn't have a school in the near future to address that problem. So how are you going to deal with those inefficiencies in the short run, because you are already losing students? So that's what I was trying to get at. Like, what's the vision for how we drive this at a fierce urgency of now, because it does seem like that's where we are.
Well, the reality is that we have to make short-term decisions and long-term decisions to pivot. And so when I think about short-term decisions, it may be, you know, kind of going back to the technology piece, looking at, well, how much money are we spending on instructional technology? Where are we duplicating, you know, services? It may be a personnel issue. So if we have declining student enrollment, we may not need the same level of personnel. And so how do we look at attrition as people retire, as people make different choices about working somewhere else, not necessarily filling that position, but recognizing that we need to save funding to do some of these pivots. So that's like the more short term. But we have to be thinking and planning for the long term too. And that might be the shuttering of 1 or 2 schools in our district. And if so, we have a good sense of, you know, how much savings we'll get. But again, it helps us pivot. And so as an administration, we're doing both at the same time. We do need direction from our board on some of these things. And I think they're attuned to that. but they also want to do it based on good data. And like I said, Dr. Dollar and Carolina Demography will be sharing with our board at their December 11th retreat. That'll be one of our major focus areas.
I've got one back here.
I just want to take a minute to say thank you. This is tremendous. I love what you're doing here, the fact you're reaching out to all of us in multiple meetings. You're doing this from a data-driven perspective. You're thoughtful, you're thorough. You say we're not in a crisis. I also feel like you're not creating a panic, which is really commendable leadership. And I just want to say thank you for this evening and the way that you're approaching this with our community. So thank you, Dr. Trice.
I appreciate that.
I was going to say, that's a great note to end on, but I'm not going to turn down a hand that's in the air, so I'm going to go over here.
Maybe I'll just end on someone mentioned many of us are connected to UNC. It's your alma mater. I just looked it up.
Yes.
You got your PhD at Department of Education. And so we might not get tax dollars out of them, but boy, are there a lot of young, passionate people. And there are some PhD dissertations in here. There are a lot of students I think we could be engaging, whether it's in education or across our campus. If we're looking for innovation, if we're looking to think outside of the box, we are not the only district and county who's going through these demography changes, right? Globally, these birth declines are happening. And so I guess I would just sort of challenge you and all of us, like, I'm not sure if you're already connected and engaging with the university or with students, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to pull them in. I see projects, I see practicums, I see papers, let's pull in the young people, and I hope someone works on these slides and makes these accessible for our middle school kids. Maybe elementary, I don't know, but our middle school and high school, please take this to the students also. Let's hear from them. I mean, they'll surprise us.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I think that's aligned with kind of the direction we want to go, and not just the university, but I think about our chamber, our local businesses. I mean, they can all be really strong partners in thinking about our future.
So Dr. Trice, why don't we do this? If folks have to slip out, that is all right. Take as many cookies as you would like on your way home this evening. I know we'll all stick around for individual discussion if you'd like, but I'll leave it to you for some closing thoughts to wrap us up. Yeah.
No, again, I just want to say thank you. I mean, I know it's a lot. You all are incredibly busy to spend your evening with us. But this is basically a level set on what the information is. You have access to the slide decks from our previous meetings. If there are follow-up questions, please reach out to me or Andy. I know he's taking questions because I know when you leave here, things might emerge. But I like to say that you all are kind of ambassadors now. Like, you've been through the presentation. This is the data that we share with our board. We're sharing with our community. It is what it is, but at the end of the day, we have to pivot to become a smaller district. I think that's my responsibility as a superintendent, and this is the beginning of a conversation about our future, not the end. And so I just hope that you would stay engaged, because we're gonna be reaching out about what our future kind of looks like. So thank you for tonight.